Andy, if someone were to say, if God suddenly appeared to me, I would believe in him, how would you respond to that?
Do you know, one of my favourite conversations I once had, Alan, was back when I was living in Canada. I just finished an event and a young man came up to me to speak to me afterwards and raised just this question. He introduced himself. He said, "Hi, I'm Steve. I'm an atheist." And I think I recall saying, "Why don't I just call you Steve? It's shorter." And he said, "Well, I'm an atheist, Andy." He said, "But I'm willing to believe in God this evening." And there was something about his demeanour that told me there was perhaps an elephant trap here. So I said, "Oh, that sounds very interesting. Go on." And then he raised exactly this one. He said, "Yes, all that would need to happen is for God to do a personal miracle for me right here, right now, this evening, and I would believe in God." And he kind of stopped and smiled like the kind of cat that hasn't just got the cream but the entire dairy. And I thought about it for a moment and I looked at him and I said, "Okay, let me clarify. If you were to walk out of this building in half an hour's time, out into the car park, and then suddenly, in letters of fire above the Rocky Mountains, because we were in Vancouver where this conversation was happening, above the mountains appeared the message, 'Dear Steve, I love you, hugs and kisses Jesus,' you would believe in God. Is that what you're saying?" And he went, "Yes." And again, he looked quite triumphant, so obviously assuming that I hadn't, rigged up special effects above the mountains for him. So I said, "Okay, interesting." I said, "Has it ever occurred to you that God is not particularly interested in you believing in him?" I wish I could have taken a photo actually, because it was sort of quite a startled face he pulled. He went, "What?" I said, "Oh, God's not merely interested in you believing in him." He said, "I thought you were a vicar of some kind." I went, "Well, I suppose I am of some kind." He went, "Are you one of those like liberal ones that we hear about in the news?" I went, "No, I'm one of those conservative ones that you also hear about in the news." He went, "Then what the heck are you talking about?" I said, "Well, here's the thing." I said, "It says in the Bible, actually, that even the devil believes in God and trembles. So mere belief is not what matters." I said, "Steve, God is not interested in beating you at some game of intellectual chess, giving you some ridiculous piece of evidence, and then you're forced to go, okay, God exists, and then you walk away and God has become one more fact you believe in." I said, "God is just not interested in you merely believing in him." And then it was great because his follow-up question was, well, what is God interested in? And I said, "I'm glad you asked that." I said, "God actually wants not just your belief, but your complete, total submission and surrender. God basically wants you to bow the knee, wave, as it were, the white flag, surrender, take your hands off your life and say, 'God, my entire life is yours. I give it all to you.' And that's what God's after." And then he looked at me and he said, "Well, what right has God got to demand that?" Which I thought was a great question. I said, "Well, two thoughts, really." I said, the first thought is that, of course, it's God's game and God's rules. God's the creator of the universe. That's the way he's designed it. He gets the right to design it the way he wants. But I said, more seriously, I said, God gets the right to ask everything from you because he's already taken the first move and he's given you everything. The Bible says in Romans chapter 5, verse 8, that while we were still sinners, while we were still rebels, while we were still messing around with silly intellectual games, God demonstrates his love in that Christ died for us. And so God's given you everything. He's given you the life of his son, Jesus, in order to win for you forgiveness and reconciliation and peace. That's what's on offer on the table. So God's not asking you to do anything he hasn't already done. But of course that brings us to Jesus, which is also important here. Because even if God did that amazing miracle and wrote something across the Rocky Mountains in fire, it'd be quite impressive now. But a week goes by, a month goes by, a year goes by, you've forgotten it. It's over. It's in the distant past. And there's no evidence, unless you've got your iPhone camera out very, very quickly, but it's a miraculous message. Maybe it doesn't appear in photographs. More of a miracle. How do you know that what you saw actually happened? And the amazing thing about the resurrection is the overwhelming evidence for who Jesus was, what he did, and the historical evidence for the resurrection reminds me, whenever I have any doubts about what I believe and I want to be reassured, I just go back and remind myself that incredible event of what God did for me in the person of Jesus, so well attested in terms of evidence, fantastic foundation on which I'm willing to step forward and say to God, okay, you win. Everything I have is yours.